Parshas Bechukosai begins with a pasuk, Im Bechukosai Telechu, Ve'es Mitzvoisai Tishmeru, Va'asisem Oisam. Literally, if in my laws, my decrees, you will go, and my mitzvahs you will observe and perform them. So the next pasuk goes on to promise, V'nosati gishmeichem be'itom, I will provide your rains in the right time, and v'nosno ha'oretz yevulo, the earth will give its produce, and so on. What does it mean, in my decrees you will go? Rashi says, Yochol ze kiyum ha-mitzvahs. You might want to say that Bechukosai Telechu is referring to the observance of mitzvahs. However, Kishehu oimer ves mitzvoisai tishmeru harei kiyum ha-mitzvos omu. When the pasuk states es mitzvoisai tishmeru, that means observing the mitzvahs. Homani mekayim im bechukosai telechu. So what? How do we interpret im bechukosai telechu? Shetiyu amelim batoicho. That you should labor, you shall toil in the learning of Torah. So we understand that we're interpreting Bechukosai Telechu to be referring to the learning of Torah because the observance of mitzvahs is included in Es Mitzvoisai Tishmeru. However, where does Rashi get the right to say that Bechukosai Telechu means amelim b'Torah, laboring, toiling in Torah? Maybe it just means learning Torah. I want to suggest that learning Torah is one of the 613 mitzvahs, and therefore learning Torah is also included in the Es Mitzvoisai Tishmeru. Therefore, we need to say that Bechukosai Telechu is not referring to just learning Torah. In Bechukosai Telechu is referring to toiling in Torah. That is something that goes beyond Mitzvoisai Tishmeru. And that's because in mitzvahs, there's no requirement of labor, toil. Sure, if I don't have an esrig nearby, I would need to travel. I would need to work hard to acquire one. It goes without saying that if I'm a bad-natured person and it takes effort to accomplish v'ahavto l'reyacha kamoicha, I will need to do so. However, if I can perform a mitzvah easily, there's no reason that I should take upon myself difficulties. There's no intrinsic value in labor as far as the observance of mitzvahs is concerned. However, when it comes to the learning of Torah, we say, Kach hi darko shel Torah, so is the way of Torah, the way of learning Torah. Pas b'melach toichal, eat simply bread with salt. Mayim b'mesura tishte, ba'alo oretz tishan, v'chaye tzar tichye. Kachi darko shel Torah. When it comes to learning Torah, every bit of additional difficulty enhances the learning of Torah. When the Mishnah says lefum tzara agro, that the more pain, literally, the more reward, the Rambam in his Pirush HaMishnayos to Avos says that it's referring to the learning of Torah, and so also he says in the Yad HaChazokah. So when it comes to learning Torah, the more labor, the more toil, the more difficulty, the better. Therefore, Amelim Batoire is not included in Mitzvosai Tishmeru. It goes beyond the calling of mitzvah observance. It's something that's unique to Torah, beyond the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And therefore we say that Bechukosai Teilechu is referring to toiling in Torah. The Pasuk uses the term Teilechu when it's referring, the Pasuk uses the term of Teilechu when it's referring to the toil in learning Torah. Now that's an interesting phrase because usually walking is something that's easy. We say he just walked through it. That's a way of saying that it comes easy. Why would the Torah use the term Teilechu when it's referring to exerting yourself, when it's referring to laboring, when it's referring to toil? Teilechu. The Mishnah in Masechtas Bava Basra, in the beginning of Masechtas Bava Basra, says, Hashutfin sherotzu lasois mechitze, boinen es hakoisel beemtza. The way the Gemara interprets this Mishnah, it means that partners that consented to divide their partnership, to divide the partnership they have in a courtyard, they equally share the expense of building a fence, and the fence is built equally on the property of each one of these partners. The Gemara asks that we know that a partner can force his partner to divide the partnership. So why does the Mishnah say Hashutfin sherotzu lasois mechitze? The Gemara says we're talking over here about a chotzer she'ein boi din chaluke. Yesh boi din chaluke is when there are at least 8 amos, 4 for each partner. Then one can force the other to split. However, when there is less than 8 amos, it's an ein boi din chaluka, there's not enough to divide, and therefore only if the shutfin are rotzu lasois mechitza, they agreed to divide the courtyard, then they divide it. So the Gemara says, Ki rotzu mayavi, lehedribu. So what if they want it? Why can't one of the partners retract and say that he no longer wants to divide the partnership? So the Gemara says that we're talking in a case כגון שהולך זה בתוך שלוי והחזיק והולך זה בתוך שלוי והחזיק, that he walked in his half and made a chazokeh, and he walked in his half and made a chazokeh. Now what does that mean? Rashi says v'hichzik the rofak bopur, he dug into the ground. You know, one of the acts of acquisition, one of the maisei kinyan that we have is the kinyan of chazokeh. Chazokeh is a kinyan of displaying ownership, locking the gate, breaking the fence, digging into the ground. So Rashi says that that's what we're referring to. If they made chazokis, they went and dug into the ground, I dug into my half, you dug into your half, that's a chazokeh, and from that point on, we no longer can go back on our word, and we have to divide the courtyard. However, Tosfos asks that if we mean to say that we each made a chazokeh, so the question comes back, what's the chiddush? What is is the Mishnah teaching me? Obviously, if we each made a chazakah, the partnership is now over. We can also ask, if we're talking about a case where each one dug into his ground, why does the Gemara say, Holach zeh betoich shaloi v'hichzik? He went in his half and he made a chazakah. Obviously, if he dug into the ground, he had to go there. You can't dig without going there. So why are we saying Holach zeh betoich shaloi v'hichzik? So it's interesting that the Rambam in his Pirush HaMishnayos writes like this: V'kevon sherotzu lachlok. And since they wanted to divide the shutfas, v'nisratze kol echad mishneihem beruach ploini, and each one agreed upon one side. Kigoyin shehichzik bekarkoi beragloi ein kol echad yochel lahachzik. The Rambam says Holach zeh v'toich sheloi v'hichzik means that he was made a chazakah with walking. The walking in itself constitutes the chazakah. Now, we paskin like the Chachomim in the Mishnah on Daf Kuf in Bava Basra, that walking does not constitute a chazakah. So obviously the Rambam is telling us that in spite of the fact that walking does not constitute a chazakah in a general acquisition, however, when we're talking not about acquiring something that wasn't yet mine, but we're talking about property in which I had a mutual ownership with my partner, and all we're doing now is dividing the partnership, not acquiring something new. In this context, halicha, walking, does constitute a chazakah. And therefore the Rambam says that Holach zeh betoich sheloi v'hichzik means hichzik. He made a chazakah by walking in itself. Says the Rogachover that therefore the Torah talks about toiling in Torah in terms of teilechu, because when we're acquiring Torah, it's not an acquisition of something that we don't yet own. Everybody already owns his part in Torah. Torah tziva lonu Moshe moirosho kehilas Yaakov. We all inherited the legacy of Torah. We just have to find our place within Torah. And therefore, true, we need to exert ourselves. True, we need to labor. True, we need to toil. But at the same time, we need to know that it's not like acquiring something new, which obviously requires so much more labor. The Torah is telling us that laboring in Torah is compared to teilechu. It's really just walking through it. Once you invest the energy, once you exert yourself, you will find that you're just walking through it because you're just reconnecting, you're just finding your place in something that you already own. I want to read to you a story that I think illustrates this idea. It's a story that's recorded in a book, The God File, by Rabbi Aryeh Ben David, who conducted over the years seminars where he asked people to share with others a spiritual moment that they experienced. And in this context, a girl got up and shared the following story. She said, "My parents are Jewish, but my family belonged to a Protestant church. At home, my parents gave everything Jewish a negative spin. If someone did something rude, dumb, or unappealing, the reaction was always, 'Stop acting so Jewish.' I always felt out of place no matter where I went, like someone who's been disowned and can't adjust to it. When I was a junior at Bennington in the late 1980s, I wanted to visit Israel. I don't know what inspired this. I live by my hunches. Unfortunately, I was out of place in the overseas program at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba. The other students were American Jews who'd gone through Jewish youth groups and summer camps, etc. After a couple of months in the wrong place, I made plans to go home, wondering why my hunch had been so wrong. Because I was already in Israel, I figured that I ought to do some obligatory sightseeing. Near the end of my stay, I went to Jerusalem with a non-Jewish friend from Finland who was volunteering in Israel. We went to the Western Wall. Okay, nice stones, but it didn't do anything for me. I'd done my sightseeing and was leaving the Western Wall Plaza to go back to Beersheba, back to America, when a stranger struck up a conversation with my friend and me. Were we interested in Judaism? Would we like to join a religiously observant family for Shabbat? I didn't quite know what Shabbat was, but the stranger seemed nice and talked about opportunities to learn about Judaism. That clicked a switch in my cranky brain. After all, wasn't that what I had come to Israel for to begin with? Why not? Let's go for it. I looked the part. I was wearing a vintage antique dress, long-sleeved and skirt. We were sent to a family in Mea Shearim, an extremely religious neighborhood in Jerusalem. They didn't speak any English, and we didn't speak any Yiddish, but somehow we communicated. They were giving, sincere people. In their home, I felt myself entering a religious experience that seemed real. I didn't understand the rituals. I didn't know the Yiddish table songs. And I couldn't even chat with them, but all evening I felt something touching me deeply, as if my heart recognized and understood it all. Later that evening, my friend said goodbye and quickly disappeared, like someone escaping a bad experience. When I found him the next day in Beersheba, he explained his hasty departure. He said, I traveled a lot, and I've swum easily in a lot of different places, but I never felt so much like a stranger, so completely that I didn't belong, that I was in the wrong place. I experienced exactly the opposite. I couldn't say why, but I felt that I finally found my place. My friend's aversion, like a magnet set to the wrong pole of another magnet, made me realize that he was different from me. Simply put, we came from different roots. For a girl like me, brought up in a Presbyterian church, it was a revelation. I was a Jew after all. Maybe that is why, with my confused background, I always felt out of place. My hunch long ago had been true, had been right. I never saw the Mea Shearim family again. They probably have no idea what effect they had on me, but they opened me up to explore Judaism. I'm still searching. It's been a twisting road, but I know that, having found my home in Judaism, it's impossible for me to be someone else ever again. That's Bechukosai Teilechu. It takes effort. It takes labor. You have to break through. But when you get there, it's walking through it. Because Torah tziva lanu Moshe moirosho kehilas Yaakov. We are all connected to Torah. We have our place in Torah. We have our part in Torah. It's like shutfin sherotzu lasis mechitza bechotzer, that holach zeh betoich sheloi vehichzik. Hiluch, walking through it, is a chazaka. The Rabbi Shalom should help now that Shavuos is coming along. time for Kabbalah Torah, we should realize how connected we really are to Torah. A guten Shabbos.